on the Boardwalk kind of hotline ahead of Bellator MMA tomorrow night, the World Grand Prix quarterfinal. It is the former lightweight champion of the world, Josh Thomson, joins us live in virtual color here on the Boardwalk kind of hotline here on 97.3 ESPN. Josh, how you doing today?
Good myself. Well, thanks for having me on.
I appreciate you jumping on. You know, you're someone who has seen a lot in this sport. Before we get to specifically, the fight tomorrow night, I want to ask you, because you have been all around. There's got to be some familiarity for you, because we got a Grand Prix in 2021, and this was stuff that we were seeing 20 years ago. So it's almost like the MMA game has come full circle.
Yeah, we started just repeating the best trends that happened in the beginning of the sport, just like, bell bottoms, they went out of style, but guess what? They're back. You know what I mean? So we're just kind of doing what kind of got the sport off the ground to begin with. And I think what people really like about this, especially the fighters, is that they know exactly when they're fighting next. They know when their next paycheck is coming. They know who their next opponent is. They can go back after they win their fight. They go to the drawing board and just start figuring out, hey, this is the way I'm going to beat this fighter. They also know every fighter that's in it because they're higher level guys, but also because like once you know who's in the tournament, you can kind of start preparing for each person individually, especially on the ones on your side of the bracket.
And on that point, how much do you think has the game evolved? I mean, you fought in the UFC. You were the Strikeforce lightweight champion of the world. You fought in Bellator before you became a commentator. You even had some time in Pride. So, how has the game to you changed over the last 20 years? Because, obviously for some people there's a lot of these BC people, before Connor, they don't really know MMA. So, explain to people out there, maybe they're new to the sport. How has the game evolved and how has it changed in your eyes?
There's a lot of different ways that it's evolved. I think every fighters are getting more creative. I think that kind of started a little bit with Anthony Pettis when he started jumping off the cage with flying kicks, those kind of things. Fighters have become better athletes. I think just overall, the world has produced better athletes. You've seen across the board how explosive sprinters are getting, how dynamic, a lot of the fighters are, boxers are, a lot of the footwork and movement. What they've done is they've taken a craft. All athletes have taken a craft that, was developed from the beginning stages of whenever the sport started, but they've all gotten better. I mean, you got to say, like, before there was pre-MJ, it was very much just drive the lane and lay up and, maybe a dunk here and there. And then it got to the MJ, Michael Jordan, and then it went Kobe Bryant. And then now you're seeing just the evolution of guys like LeBron James, who are just physically just blessed and gifted, with all the hard work I'm sure that they put in as well. But the athletes have gotten a lot better. And I don't know if that's just from all the chemicals in our food, but for some reason, somehow, the diets have gotten better, the nutrition and the supplements and all those things that come along with being an athlete has gotten better. Learning for your body to recover, train in the morning, recover, eat, what types of foods to put back in your body. But, and then so on. Sometimes fighters are, athletes, almost all athletes are training at least twice a day, sometimes 3 times a day, if broken up properly. And they've learned how to rest their body as well, because rest is so important. There's a lot of different ways that I can say the game has changed. But I would just say mentally, it would be more of learning your body and physically feeling how, what is best for you to rest for better gains later on, instead of just pounding your body against the wall and just depleting yourself fully. You're seeing also, I think, the best thing, to be honest, across the board. And it wasn't until I started doing my podcast with Big John McCarthy, and I have a podcast called Weighing In. It wasn't until I started doing the show with him that I realized that all the fighters that have been just killing themselves to make weight, it's really crushing their performances in the cage, and we've seen that across the board. I mean, there's a lot of guys that are they're realizing that their performances are a lot better at the weight that they walk around at, versus having to cut all that weight. A lot of fighters are depleting their body almost, 30 to 40 pounds sometimes at the highest, but I mean, for me, it was casual. Cut 20 pounds, no problems. And I've cut 20 pounds within, 24 to 48 hours, and so I don't know how much that affected my performances. I always felt great. But the bottom line is that when I look back at it now, I'm like, man, I could have had great performances maybe at 170. It was harder for me because it was such a big jump from 155 to 170. 15 pounds is a lot of weight to give up. But the lower weights, they go 10 pounds, they go 25, 35, 45, 55. But when you get to 70, it's like, okay, now you're dealing with a whole different level of animal, and that extra 5 pounds makes a big difference, because those guys cutting down. So I would say overall, that's the best part of how the game has changed. You're getting better athletes who know how to take care of themselves and then have built their muscle memory and their athleticism up to a performance level, which is it has been unmatched.
And how much of also that, just going on a side note here, the wrestling impact in the sport of MMA was there from the very beginning in the early 90s, right? The weight cuts have always been a part of wrestling, right? How much maybe did that cause some of this? The fact that people were like, well, this is what we always did, and maybe people for so long just didn't think they could do it another way.
Well, look, there's a bunch of different ways of looking at it. Jiu-jitsu took it by storm with Hoist Gracie when he was just subbing everybody, getting through people, even wrestlers he was beating, okay? But the wrestlers got hit to the game and started learning how to defend the submissions, and then the fact that they were able to cut weight, which they were leaps and bounds above everybody else, in that area, because jiu-jitsu guys never considered cutting weight. So once wrestlers learned how to defend the submission game a little bit, and then them dropping so much weight, they came in so much bigger than the jiu-jitsu guys, they learned how to nullify it all. And then you've got guys that came in that finally learned how to stuff takedowns and learned how to defend jiu-jitsu, and stuffing takedowns and learning how to defend jiu-jitsu. They became really good kickboxers. And so those guys started taking over. It's been the evolution of the game throughout. You know what I mean? So overall, though, I think that wrestlers, sure, they've made their mark in the sport, but let's not forget, wrestlers were secondary to the jiu-jitsu guys in the very beginning of the sport because they didn't know where to put their hands. They didn't know how to grab somebody. They knew how to control them on the ground. But in a real fight, how are you controlling me on the ground where I'm not losing my arm or losing a leg or getting triangled? So there's a lot of things that wrestlers had to work through to get to the level they're at now. But to talk to you about the advantage, wrestlers always I felt had the advantage in terms of they know how to cut weight properly, and they know how to put the weight back on properly. And we still see to this day fighters that don't know how to cut weight properly. And when they don't know how to cut weight properly, they end up hurting themselves to the point of having to go to the hospital sometimes. And this isn't just MMA, though, by the way. This is also boxing. We've seen this in boxing as well, and in other sports as well. So when they don't know how to cut weight properly, they end up sometimes having to go to the hospital for an IV or hydration, or they just hurt themselves, their performances the next day. So they may have dominant first rounds because they feel strong and they're bigger, this and that. But by the halfway through the second round, they are depleted. They are done. So those changes, I think, are for the good and for the better of the sport. Fighters are realizing that that cutting an excessive amount of weight is not always beneficial to their performance.
Absolutely. And of course, it affects the other guy they're fighting too, because if that fight gets taken off the card, you see a situation like Marvin Vettori with the UFC last year, chasing the guy down the lobby in the middle of a pandemic when you fight him in the lobby because he didn't make weight, because he's like, you took money away from me, you bleepity blank, and just cussing him out in the middle of a hotel area. So, I mean, these things affect more than just one aspect. There's a whole lot of people who get impacted if things don't go right.
Yeah, let's not I like Vettori a lot. I love his performances. But let's not forget, he got paid his show money because he was able to make weight. So I know he was out the full amount of purse, assuming he was going to win that fight, but he still got paid his show money because once you make weight, they're going to pay you your show money. That's what they're bonded for. That's what the athletes are bonded for, and the promotion will take care of the fighter who made weight. So they're contractually by that. They should have got paid at least his show money. Which, if you look at it, of course, when something like that has happened to me before, is you look at it in terms of, man, I could have made my full purse. But the reality of it is that you just got paid half your purse, which is a significant amount of money, to take no damage. That's pretty good. And the fact that you're still in shape and you can get matched later on. Let's just say another 3 weeks later, you jump right into a camp and you get your show money already. So you just made your first show and win money, basically equivalent, and a chance to make more, all within a 3 week to a month period. I think that's pretty smart. So I know as much as Vettori was upset, and other fighters have been upset too, I would have been really upset as well, because you're prepared for that fighter specifically. But I think after a couple days and maybe one cocktail, Vettori was probably cooled off a little bit and realized, hey, by Monday I'll get back in the gym, I'll be in shape, I'll keep doing what I'm doing, and I'll get another fight here shortly. And that's pretty much what happened. So I think for him, it's better to get the show money. And once you get that show money, realizing that, I didn't take any damage. My body didn't take any abuse, and I'm going to get basically paid my full purse my next fight.
Josh Thomson, the former Strikeforce lightweight champion, the world MMA commentator for Bellator MMA, joining us here on the Boardwalk Kind of Hotline at The Real Punk on Twitter. You can follow him there. Of course, tomorrow night, Bellator MMA, the World Grand Prix quarterfinal. You got some really interesting fights and some pretty interesting names as well. You got Nemkov versus Davis 2. Got to emphasize it's the second time these two guys have fought. Also, Corey Anderson getting in on the action as well. I want to focus on Nemkov versus Phil Davis too, because I talked to Davis years ago, was still in the UFC, and I remember him talking about how, his goal was to always to be a champion. And it feels like for him, he's been so close. He's gotten almost there. He's had all these opportunities. He just hasn't gotten there. How do you feel about Phil Davis at this point in his career? Because I remember years ago when he was, this up and coming riser at lightweight. Now he's a veteran of the game, and he's felt like he's been more of the bridesmaid than anything else at this point.
Well, let's not forget he was the light heavyweight world champ at Bellator when he first came into the scene, and then Ryan Bader beat him for the title, and then Ryan Bader just losing his title to Nemkov in his last performance. But I mean, I would have to agree with you though a little bit. Phil Davis has always been the bridesmaid and never really the bride. I mean, he has been the bride. Don't get me wrong; he's been the champion. But the one thing about him though is that styles make matchups, and I want to tell you this. He is somebody, though, that after having a long conversation with him this week and in weeks before as well, throughout his camp, I've talked to him, and we've just talked in terms of he is somebody that doesn't utilize his wrestling. He utilizes his striking. He likes it, and he's got phenomenal submissions, and he's got some of the best wrestling in all of MMA. And so the thing is, I think he realized in his last performance when he fought Nemkov, because this is Nemkov Davis 2, he got started a little slow, and that's always been the knock on Phil Davis. The knock is he likes to fill it out on the feet, see what he can do, and let the fight develop. Well, that's hard when you're fighting somebody like Nemkov in a 3-round fight. This fight, though, is a 5-round fight for the light heavyweight world title and the ability to advance in the light heavyweight world Grand Prix. So there's a lot on the line, not to mention there's $1 million on the line, plus his win and show money based on his purse. So he'll be making, all of these fighters will be making a shitload of, sorry if I can't say that word, but they'll be making a ton of money coming into that. I saw you hit that button.
That's what it's there for, man.
Yeah, sorry, buddy. But they'll be making a ton of money. All of them will be making a ton of money to advance in this tournament. So there's a lot on the line when it comes down to it. So Phil Davis, just all he has to do, I really believe, if you go back and watch the first fight with Nemkov, all he has to do is utilize his wrestling earlier in the fight, start to slow Nemkov down because Nemkov is explosive. He's a 3-time Sambo world champion. He's got great striking. He's got good wrestling takedowns, good throws. But if Phil can out-wrestle him in the beginning portions of that fight, that'll start to dictate the pace for the rest of the fight. What Nemkov is not good at, and he's phenomenal, don't get me wrong, but because he is so explosive and he uses a lot of power for the hip tosses and the throws, is that he tends to slow down as the fight goes on in that 4th and 5th round, which he has never been to. We've seen him slow down towards the latter end of the 2nd and 3rd round. So if Phil can get in Nemkov's grill right off the bat and start making him wrestle and start touching him with the jab and doing all the things that Phil does very well, he just got to be more active with it. I think he's got a chance to upset the champion.
And of course, don't forget the fight that they had. That wasn't that was a decision split.
Yes.
So, and Davis, all 3 of his last fights, the 2 versus Bader, he lost, and then Nemkov, those are split decisions. And you can speak to that. That there's a part of you that's like, what the heck do I got to do sometimes? Because I go back to your trilogy you had with Gilbert Melendez. I mean, you get up there and you have this look on your face like, I know I gave my heart to this fight.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that I know about that fight between Gil and I. But I mean, with Phil Davis, it's exactly right. Is that with Phil Davis, he has to understand the Ryan Bader situation. He had two losses to him. I believe both were by split decision. They were very close, but I think stylistically they match up almost. They just nullify each other. Phil Davis, though, and Nemkov is not the case. They're almost mirror images of each other, but they don't nullify each other the way that Ryan Bader and Phil Davis do. Nemkov is willing to take the chances. Nemkov will throw. He throws technically and more sound than Ryan Bader does, as we found out in their last fight when he knocked out Ryan Bader with the head kick and a follow-up. You know what I mean? So when we're talking about these two fighting, they've fought before. It was a great performance. It was a great fight. but this is an extra 2 rounds. And if you were to go back and watch that last fight, Nemkov started to wither a little bit under the pressure and under the time and the pressure of Phil Davis. And Phil Davis was just getting started. And that's what I think may be the difference in this fight. It will be an explosive, fast, hard-fought fight, but Nemkov is somebody who doesn't really know how to pace himself just yet. He's still young. I want to say he's 27 years old. He still has a lot of growth to do. He's still a young champion. So he needs to understand that Phil Davis is a veteran. He's going to try to pull out every trick he can and control every scenario, every position, and sort of chip away at him. And if he can do that, Phil Davis has a chance. Nemkov, all he's got to do is stick and move, stay relaxed, let the fight develop in front of him, and utilize his power and his wrestling to stop the takedowns. And then he'll have a chance as well to win this fight again.
Now, before we get to Nemkov and Davis, for those who are going to flip on Showtime tomorrow night, someone's saying like, hey, give me another reason. Give me another fight. Give me a fight before we get the Nemkov, before we get the Corey Anderson and Paul Daly. Give me somebody a little lower on the card that you're going to tell people when you tune in, if you miss this fight, you are missing out.
Okay, so there's 2 fights, and I mean, I really hate to say this, but there's 2 fights. You have the very first fight of the prelim. The reason why we have that very first fight on the prelim is because they're both fighters from the UK, and so you've got Mads Burnell, you've got him fighting Saul Rogers, who was also the finalist on The Ultimate Fighter, didn't get to fight to win the whole thing because of visa problems. He's from the UK. They're having it early to make sure that the UK market gets to see it. That fight right there should be phenomenal, and so that fight to me is an absolute barn burner. That's the very first fight on the prelims, which can be watched on Bellator YouTube, Showtime YouTube as well, and also Pluto TV. And now if you want to talk in terms of earlier in the main card, there's no other fight. I mean, like Sabah Hamasi versus Paul Semtex Daly. I'm sorry, but Paul Daly always brings it. And Hamasi is somebody who trains with Dustin Poirier and all the guys at American Top Team. And he is just a barn burner of a fight. This fight has been scheduled 3 times. Paul Daly didn't make weight for the first 2, so they didn't fight. They've upped the weight 5 pounds. So Paul Daly made weight perfectly, didn't deplete himself. So to me, that makes sure that this fight is going to be a lot more explosive than if Paul Daly had depleted himself all the way down to 170. We're going to see an action-packed fight to start the show for Bellator.
And again, of course, the main card starts tomorrow night, 9 p.m. on Showtime. It is Bellator 257, and he is Josh Thomson. He will be on the call for the fights tomorrow night. Give him a follow on Twitter @TheRealPunk. And Josh, plug the podcast again with you and Big John.
Of course, me and Big John. Catch us on Weighing In. It's called Weighing In Podcast. It's on all the audio platforms as well and in YouTube as well. Check us out there. You can follow me at The Real Punk, like you said, and follow John McCarthy MMA as well. Give us a follow, man. You'll love it.
I love it, man. Appreciate you jumping on. I love you joining me a little trip down memory lane there because, like I said, there's a whole contingent of people out there. They're BCers, I call them,
Yeah.
They don't know the world before Conor, and they don't realize, there's a whole history of this game of explosive fight. I mean, those years when you guys were in Strikeforce, to me, is some of the best years of MMA. So I appreciate it, man.
You call them BC and I call them casuals, but whatever. We just call them fans. That's what we call them. We love them all the most, and we hope they tune in and catch us on Showtime.
All right, Josh. Have a good one, man. Take care.
Oh, man. Thank you.